And now, please welcome Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport CEO Sean Donohue in discussion with Skift Editor-in-Chief Sarah Kopit.
I don't know what seat.
You're going to sit at the end. How you doing today?
Great.
Yeah?
Very good. Great to host our fifth forum with Skift, and we love the partnership, and it's great to see all our aviation friends.
Yep. So, congratulations on the retirement.
Thank you. Thank you.
What are you going to do?
As I've said to a couple people, 40 years in aviation, I think, is like 60 years in other industries. And our 5 kids live up in the Boston area. We just had our first grandchild, and it's family time now, so we're going to move up there.
If any of you have questions about retirement, what retirement may be like sometime in the future, please get on the Stova app and ask away for Sean. So,
I don't know anything about retirement yet. So.
Well, the hopes and dreams then,
Right.
I guess, yeah.
Right.
So DFW has a similar milestone, 50 years. What does that mean for the airport?
Sure. We are celebrating 50 years this year. It's been a celebration, but it's also been an opportunity for the airport to express our gratitude to everybody over the last 50 years, our employees, our business partners, obviously our airline partners. So we've really tried to focus on that. You know, it's interesting. I know there's several people from the Dallas-Fort Worth area here today, but the history of DFW is pretty interesting. At 50 years old, we're actually the second youngest large airport in the U.S., which is somewhat ironic. But about 55 or 60 years ago, Dallas and Fort Worth were kind of like the Hatfields and the McCoys, and they were both going to build their own new airport. And the CAB, the predecessor of the FAA, came to them and said, "No way in hell you're going to build one airport." And the vision of the city leaders 55 or 60 years ago was actually remarkable. If you think about it, in the late 1960s, they decided to give us 17,000 acres. When aviation, I really don't know the stats, but I'm guessing aviation was 30 or 40% of what it is today. The hub and spoke model had not really begun, and they gave us this incredible landscape to grow and will allow us to continue to grow probably for another 30 or 40 years. So kudos to the visionary leaders of Dallas and Fort Worth back then.
Yeah, so since 1974, the population has really boomed here in Dallas-Fort Worth. I take that out into the future. What do you see for this area, 10, 20, 50 years into the future?
Right. You're going to see an interesting depiction here of population growth. And as we all know, for the last 20 or 30 years, LA, Chicago, New York, pretty clearly the largest cities, metropolitan areas in the US. The DFW region will overtake Chicago probably in the next 5 or 6 years. But I recently saw an article that projected out metropolitan population by 2100. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I don't know if we could just put that last slide up that shows 2100. This is based upon very simple math.
Yeah.
It took the metropolitan growth over the last 10 years, annualized it, and then projected it out through the end of the century. But basically, it says that by the end of the century, the 3 largest metropolitan areas in the U.S. could be the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the Houston area, and Austin. That they would actually be larger than New York, LA, and Chicago. Again, we could debate, what's going to happen, lots of puts and takes, but, and Robert mentioned it, the demographics in the U.S. are definitely moving to the southern tier of the U.S. When you think of the ability to grow, I've lived in Chicago, I've lived in New York, I've never lived in LA. Great cities. New York's a great example. How can you grow New York? It's landlocked. And then you look at it from an airport perspective, and it becomes pretty fascinating because, we're celebrating 50 years, but we're also looking out over the next 50 to 75 years.
So if you're anticipating that much growth, what does infrastructure, what does the municipality need in order to support such an influx of humans and everything else that comes with humans? Right.
So at DFW, again, we're fortunate that we've got the ability to grow. We can add an 8th runway. We have 7, we can add 8. And we're building our 6th terminal. We have room to build probably another 3 to 4 terminals. So we have enough runway probably for the next 30 or 40 years. But it's interesting, even if you cut those estimates in half, you look at DFW by the end of 2060, 2070, will there need to be another airport in this region? I would suggest, be really interesting to see, you take Austin and San Antonio, you combine those 2 centers, they're probably going to be as big as the population of DFW. Could there be a 3rd hub in Texas in the future? You've got American here, you've got United in Houston. Could there be a 3rd hub in Texas? So the implications are big. The last point I'd make on it is the cities need to start thinking about this in terms of land development, because those projections are 2% annual growth. If you look at the FAA estimate through I think 2040 or 2050, FAA is estimating 3% annual growth in employments. You want to make sure you don't landlock yourself to prevent future growth for aviation.
Yeah.
And because, Sarah, aviation, the economic impact of aviation is tremendous. If you think of global GDP, 10% of global GDP is tourism and travel related. If you look at DFW, 600,000 jobs a year associated with the airport, $38 billion annually in payroll. And we don't take in any tax receipts. We don't keep any of our tax receipts. We're self-funded. Obviously, the airlines pay the vast majority. But we produce $5 billion in tax receipts for the state and the local communities. So big economic engines. And I would suggest cities and metropolitan areas need to think about what is the future so that can continue.
I was out in San Francisco a few weeks ago at a World Economic Forum event, and I was talking to a major global tourism leader who was telling me in the future, and we are talking, the future, right. 20, 30 years from now, he doesn't think we'll need airports in the way that they have them now, and mostly the ancillaries. He was saying, a Waymo's gonna come to my house, pick me up, take me to the airport. It's gonna take me right to the plane. My bag's gonna be tagged. Maybe it'll pick it up at the house. It'll be delivered right to my hotel. I don't need to go to the airport anymore, other than to have a runway where the plane is, takes off, takes me to wherever I wanna go. What say you?
Well, I would agree with the premise that the overall transportation, kind of the modal transportation around airports, I think is going to change pretty dramatically. I mean, today at DFW, 1 out of every 3 cars coming onto the airport is a TNC, an Uber or a Lyft. Yeah. 1 out of 3. You mentioned Waymo and where that might go with self-driving cars. What does that mean for airports, for example, in terms of parking revenue?
Yeah.
I have 40,000 parking spots at DFW. I'm not sure I'll ever build another garage because of what's going on with the trends. What's it mean from a revenue perspective? Overall parking to DFW is $200 million a year. And I think it also ties in with how what are the different modes people get to the airport. It's great that, we've got a rail line to Fort Worth and a rail line to Dallas. Not as many people ride it as you would like to see. eVTOLs, we're planning around that. I'm not sure that will have a massive impact, but we're planning around it. So there's going to be a lot of changes, but the core of an airport, after listening to Robert and obviously talking to him all the time, Americans' investment in DFW is amazing.
Yeah.
It's just incredible what they've done. We wouldn't be the airport without American. And, the growth and some of those stats we showed, I don't see that fundamentally changing.
Yeah. Especially the new airports. Like I was at the Harvey Milk Terminal at SFO. It was amazing.
They did a great job.
I went to a museum.
Yeah, they did a great job.
In my time.
Yep.
So the world is kind of complicated right now. There's a lot going on. We have wars, climate change, all sorts of stuff that impact and affect airports. How do you stay competitive in a landscape where we don't know what's going to happen one day to the next? It's very unstable in the world.
It is. I remember during the pandemic when we were all trying to figure out, what the hell was going to happen. And I always felt, and I don't mean this to be Pollyannish, and I still feel this, there is a spirit to travel. And I think there is always going to be a desire for customers and people to connect. And that's obviously gone on steroids in the last couple of years, especially international. Yeah. And I think that's really going to continue. And face-to-face is, to me, so much more important than Zoom calls. And I mean that both for people traveling, and I mean it for my employees, how we connect with our employees and our customers and our business partners. So I know aviation is incredibly unpredictable. We've all gone through, significant interruptions. But I continue to be very optimistic about aviation, and at its core, people still wanting to travel to connect.
Yeah. So let's flip the switch then. Okay. What keeps you up at night?
Well, I think one of the things, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with this, is cyber. Yeah. Cyber definitely is something that we are extremely focused on. Our federal partners have done a very good job in keeping us in the loop in terms of potential threats. We saw, and I'm not being critical, we saw what happened in Seattle. It's all the intelligence we get is the bad actors would like to disrupt infrastructure. And airports are obviously massive infrastructure. So cyber is something we have invested in. We know we can't be 100% secure when it comes to cyber. Our board has been incredibly supportive of a lot of our investments. But you got to keep doing it, because all it takes is one person like me clicking on a scan, and then the bad actors are in your system. And it's sometimes pretty tough to find them. So cyber is one. Second one is, what is our employee proposition for the future?
Yeah, talent.
Yeah. We got 2,000 great employees at DFW, just wonderful, wonderful employees, but we've gone through a change since the pandemic. We lost a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of experience. We've hired a lot of brand new folks. Safety is a big, it's always been a priority for aviation, I know that. But because of the change in the employee base, we're seeing more near misses in the industry. We're seeing more issues. So how do we train and educate and continue to make sure the employees are doing everything they can do from a safety perspective, working with all our partners? So I would say those are the three: cyber, talent, and then making sure from a safety perspective we continue the remarkable record we have in this industry.
Yeah. We were talking before about electrical grids and some of the challenges that come from that for where you see the future is going. Talk to me a little bit about what you would like to see the state of Texas do for DFW.
So I know Texas, oil and gas, right? That's what you think. And obviously it's the big driver in the state. My view, and I hope I'm wrong, is one of the biggest risks we have at DFW over the next 5 or 10 years is actually energy supply. We're going to double in 5 years our power load. But when you look at what's happening in the state of Texas, data centers, which are now becoming AI-dominated data centers, and the incredible amount of power they use, I think obviously you're going to see more onshore manufacturing. I think Texas will be successful there. Texas, the electrical grid is a standalone grid. We are not connected to the rest of the United States grid. So we've had some periods in the last couple of years where the grid struggled to keep up. And so we're very focused on how can we kind of buy down that risk. So we're working with some of our partners. We've got a great partner, National Renewable Energy Lab, who's been helping us for years on our sustainability journey. And we're looking at a microgrid. Now, I'm not suggesting a microgrid for the entire airport. That would be impossible. But a microgrid that would be solar, obviously battery technology is improving, that could buy down some of our risk in terms of reducing our load. But my suggestion is, and I know a lot of people are looking at this in the state, the success story of Texas will continue, but it must be supported by the energy supply. And I know that's ironic because you think of oil and gas in Texas.
Question from the audience. What new and exciting technologies are coming in 2025?
Everyone's talking about AI. We are doing some limited work when it comes to AI. I know this shows my age. I'd like to see some other companies show results on AI, and then that might help us, so be a little bit of a fast follower. What we're really focused on, and one of our partners is in the audience today, a company named Willow, is digital twins. So we spend incredible amount of money building terminals. We're building a 6th terminal. We have gone down this path over the last couple of years of digitalizing all of our facilities. And the sole purpose is so we can get better information and we can be much, much more proactive in responding to facility issues. It could be a baggage system, could be electrical, could be plumbing. And so much so that we've built into our strategic plan that we're going to reduce our O&M costs in our facilities by 25% by the end of the decade. That's tens of millions of dollars that the airlines don't have to pay us because we have to be competitive from a cost standpoint. So we're really excited about the digital twin opportunity and what that can do to help us, again, be much, much more predictive rather than reactive.
Another question from the audience. How are you preparing for the future of extreme weather? We've seen this over and over and over and over, floods, fires, Do you have any plans to prepare for these more frequent and intense storms?
Yes. Uri, many of us remember Uri a couple years ago and what that did to Texas. Resiliency is absolutely critical. We've been working with our partners Encore. We now have 5 substations on DFW. So we've got double resiliency on both sides of our airfield, which is really important. And then as we build our new terminals, the infrastructure team's done a great job. We're building modular terminals We build them on a non-secure side of the airport, and then we transport them over. We've done that now a couple times. That allows us to build resiliency into these projects. It also reduces the cost of the project by 30% and the time by about 30%. But resiliency is very, very important moving forward for all of us. I know Americans focused on it. I know all the airlines are focused on it because I'm not predicting, but it does seem the frequency of events is going to continue to accelerate.
I can still feel it in my throat from the wildfires in the Northeast, which is where I was yesterday.
Yep.
One last question from the audience. What's the plan for updating existing terminals to replicate the high sea gate experience?
Great question. So we're building a new terminal, Terminal F, which will be a great terminal. And by the way, we already know what the next phase of F will be, where we can add another 25 gates based upon demand. Terminal C is the bane of my existence at DFW. You know, we renovated A, B, and E, and we just never were able to get to C. We're not going to renovate C. We're going to tear it down and rebuild it. And it will actually be better than the high seas. It's going to be disruptive as we do that. We'll use the modular construction approach, but it's going to take several years. But damn it, does C need to come down fast? So we're on the path, and believe me, whoever replaces me, I'm sure will do a great job delivering it. So
I like interviewing people who are about to retire. It's fun. Is it a good time to be an airport?
Yes, it is. And I admit that it's depending on geography and the size of the city. But I think it's a good time to be in aviation. I really do. And we're always going to have peaks and valleys. And when you think of aviation, not everyone is going to be at the peak at the same time.
Yeah.
Robert mentioned and spoke about some of the OEM issues, but I think it's a very good time to be in aviation. I continue to be optimistic about it. As long as we continue to prioritize our focus on the customer experience, our employees, safety, operational reliability, resiliency. There's a lot on our plate, but I would suggest that everyone's been doing a pretty good job with it, and will continue to.
All right. Well, Sean Donohue, thank you so much, and congratulations again on your retirement.
Thank you.
All right.